Hello, welcome back to Simon's Rants. I'm Simon, and today we're counting down the top 13 horror movies of all time. Before I start the list, I just want to point out that these are just my favorites. They might not be your favorites or anybody else's. But I tried to be fair and I tried to pick as many different types of horror movies as possible. So it's not all going to be slashers and it's not all going to be demon possession movies. It's going to be as much of a mix as I could make it. I've also not seen every horror movie that's ever come out. So maybe your favorite one I've never seen. So if there's a horror movie that you want me to see so I can add it to the list in the future, let me know in the comments below. Also, while we're at it, why don't you just make your own top 13 list and let me know. But that's enough for me, on with the list. Number 13, Saw. The first Saw is actually nothing like all the Saws that came after it. While the other ones glorified just the gore factor in the movies, this one was a genuine mystery and horror movie that focused heavily on the main characters and the villain. And this actually has one of my favorite villains of all time in it. I think the character of Jigsaw is great and extremely interesting. This film is also done with a very small budget, so it's impressive how much they could actually do with it. Number 12. The Thing. The Thing is a pretty basic monster horror story. There's a thing, everybody tries to kill it, and it kills all of them instead. But it's just really well done and it's a lot of fun to watch, and the effects for the time were amazing. This came out in the 80s and still looks okay today. And it's a pretty memorable monster too, something that can look like anything. That's pretty scary. Number 11, The Witch. The Witch is one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen, let alone horror movie. And it's a sad fact that modern horror movies generally don't have that much artistic integrity. That's not the case with The Witch. It's well written, it's well acted, and it's a lot of fun to look at. You don't get too many artsy horror movies anymore, but this is one of them and it was great. Number 10, Scream. Everything about Scream is iconic, from the villain to the main characters to the plot. It's all pretty basic, but they do it in a semi-satirical way that just makes the whole movie a lot of fun and overall great. It pays homage to pretty much every other great horror movie that came before it, while also coming up with something brand new and great. Number 9, The Babadook. The Babadook, in order to be enjoyed at its fullest, cannot be taken literally. This one is definitely an allegory and you have to watch it that way. This movie is about dealing with depression and loss and grief, and it's so much deeper than a standard jump scare movie. Now, like Saw, it is held back by a lack of budget, and some of the moments at the end of the movie are pretty tacky, including the dragon sound effect from Warcraft. But if you can get past the couple of silly or clunky moments, this movie's great. Until I got to the end of the movie, I was actually thinking it might be the best horror movie I'd ever seen. But unfortunately, it's not. But thanks to good acting, great writing, and a great atmosphere, this movie is still really good and deserves a spot on this list. Number 8, Nosferatu. Nosferatu is one of the earliest horror movies ever made and is still great to this day. It has some of the most iconic moments in horror history, including the shadow scene. It's also the first Dracula movie ever made and inspired all of the ones that come after it. This movie came out in 1922 and is still so much fun to watch. Yes, there's clunky moments because it came out 100 years ago, but this movie is fantastic still. And both the atmosphere and the performance of Max Schreck are so good that it covers over any issues you might have with this movie. No matter how old it gets, this is still one of the greatest horror movies of all time. Number 7, Alien. Now, I will admit that the alien design does lose its scary factor once it's out in the open and in the daylight, but as long as it's in the shadows and you're in the tight, close spaces, this movie is suffocating. The cinematography is brilliant in its use of small spaces, tight corners, and wide open spaces when they're necessary. And the Xenomorph's design is simply brilliant and iconic. Yes, he might just be a man in a rubber suit at the end, but ignore that part. The rest of the movie is great. Number 6. Get Out. Jordan Peele's debut as a director pays homage to a lot of horror movies, especially George A. Romero. While Peele's movies aren't always his scariest, they're always the best made. You can tell that he's both a fan and a student of horror film. He just loves it. And he makes the ultimate fan films. They're full of subtle writing, clever moments, and little Easter eggs hidden throughout the entire movie. And Get Out is pretty much just a perfect movie. It might not be the scariest, but it's extremely well made. Number 5, The Shining. I'm on record as saying I'm not the biggest Stanley Kubrick fan, but his style works perfectly for horror. The Shining doesn't always make sense and it has a lot of weird moments in it, but Jack Nicholson... Can you come up with a more iconic performance than that?
Here's Johnny!
Not to mention that the Here's Johnny scene is probably the most quoted and most easily recognized moment in horror history. Whether this movie horrifies you or simply fascinates you, you can't look away. This movie is great. Number 4. The Exorcist. The Exorcist was disgusting, horrifying, haunting, terrifying, and I never want to watch it again, and it was amazing. It was perfect. When people talk about The Exorcist, they always bring up the performances because the acting in this movie is phenomenal. It's great. You never see acting like this in horror movies. But what goes beyond that is that the atmosphere of this movie just feels creepy. I don't know what it is about this movie, but just something feels off about it. Maybe it's the fact that production of this movie was seemingly haunted, as many people involved with this movie died. Or maybe it's the fact that during its initial release, people had to be rushed to the hospital because they were so scared and were having heart attacks because of this movie. I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, it makes my skin crawl. And for a horror movie, that's a good thing. Number 3. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Now, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is actually considered by most people to be the first horror movie ever made. And because of the era that it was filmed in, they had to overcome a lot of problems like not having the correct lighting. And because of that, it inspired the crazy and unique set designs that are so iconic. This whole movie looks amazing, down to the set design. It's just creepy. And it's got a great plot twist that you'll never see coming. If you're a fan of older films or silent films and you just haven't seen this one yet for some reason, you should definitely check it out as soon as you can. This movie is phenomenal. Number 2. The Silence of the Lambs. Now, if there's any performance in horror history that is more iconic than Jack Nicholson in The Shining, it's Anthony Hopkins in this. And if there's any moment quoted more than "Here's Johnny," it's this.
A census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
This isn't just one of the greatest horror movies of all time. This is one of the greatest movies of all time. In fact, I'd say that this movie's basically flawless. I'd give it a 10. From the directing, to the acting, to the screenwriting, everything's amazing. There's only one horror movie I could possibly say is better than it. And that's number 1, Psycho. If there's any one director that you choose to do the best of a specific genre, it would probably be Hitchcock. And just like The Silence of the Lambs, this isn't just a great horror movie. Psycho is debatably the greatest film ever made. It invented the slasher genre and probably inspired every horror movie to come after it in some way. And then of course the iconic plot twist of having Norman Bates be Norma Bates as well. That was simply mind-boggling and led to the most chilling monologue in movie history.
They're probably watching me. Well, let them. Let them see what kind of a person I am. I'm not even gonna swat that fly. I hope they are watching. They'll see. They'll see and they'll know. And they'll say, why, she wouldn't even harm a fly.
This is one of my favorite quotes of all time. It gives me goosebumps every time I hear it. So that's my list. What did you guys think? Let me know your favorite horror movie and leave your list in the comments below. And of course, please like, share, and subscribe. It does help me out a lot. Thanks, guys. Bye.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.